Welcome to the second module of the July 2022 Title VI training for Nebraska Department of Transportation subrecipients and local public agencies. This module will cover specific Title VI responsibilities of local agencies or NDOT subrecipients, and there will also be links to some example documents. The sources of many Title VI program compliance requirements, not only for local agencies and subrecipients, but also for the NDOT itself, are the regulations that implement Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The Federal Highway Administration regulations at 23 CFR 200 and the US DOT regulations at 49 CFR 21. Both of these we talked about a little bit in Module 1. There are also some requirements for local agencies that are outlined in the NDOT Title VI Implementation Plan. I wanted to include a slide noting the difference between highway and transit Title VI programs. So a few years back, the NDOT transit section worked with local agencies who were subrecipients of transit funding through the NDOT to make sure that their transit programs had both Title VI and limited English proficiency plans. These agencies will also need a Title VI plan that is specific to streets or highways as well. The US DOT has not approved the use of a single Title VI implementation plan that would cover all modes of federally assisted transportation programs. Limited English proficiency plans and ADA program documents, however, can cover all modes and even can cover non-transportation related programs or activities. The LEP and ADA plans can really be as expansive as the local agency chooses. The general duty of a recipient of federal financial assistance with regard to Title VI is to provide for methods of administration that will give a reasonable guarantee that the recipient or other recipients or subgrantees or your contractors and subcontractors and so on, any participants of the federal financial assistance under the program will comply with all the non-discrimination requirements imposed pursuant to the Act or the regulations or to this assurance, this language being from the standard DOT assurances. This is a general duty which can be fulfilled by creating a Title VI implementation plan and including within it the methods or elements that we'll see on the following slides. And then, of course, actually implementing and following the plan that your agency creates. This slide is kind of a roadmap for the next several slides. Title VI implementation plans generally are going to contain the elements that are listed here: a policy statement, signed assurances and contract provisions, information about organization and staffing, a complaint or grievance procedure, information about training, procedures for public notification or outreach, procedures for data collection, and if applicable, detailed plans for bringing discriminatory programs into compliance. We'll also talk in the following slides about circumstances where a local agency or an NDOT subrecipient needs to report on something to the Nebraska DOT. One example is if you receive a Title VI complaint against your agency. Another is the Title VI annual update, which is submitted to NDOT by July 31st of each year. And then also NDOT may initiate a subrecipient review. Again, we'll talk about each of these things in an upcoming slide. The first element or method of administration for your agency's Title VI plan is simply a policy statement. A statement that is expressing commitment to Title VI non-discrimination. Policy statements should be signed by your agency's chief administrative officer, and they should also be circulated throughout the organization and to the public. Now, for the purpose of your Title VI implementation plan, though in Module 1 we discussed many protected classes that fall under the Title VI program umbrella, the most recent direction from the Federal Highway Administration to NDOT was not to include every protected class that we covered in the prior module in your Title VI plan policy statement. The Federal Highway Administration's direction was to limit your Title VI plan policy statement to only race, color, and national origin. It feels like contradictory direction given the emphasis placed on the distinction between Title VI, the law, and Title VI, the program, in federal guidance that we touched on in the prior module. Nevertheless, that is the direction that the NDOT has received, and I would advise local agencies to do the same in their Title VI plan policy statements. The next element, which should be included in your agency's Title VI implementation plan, are signed assurances and contract provisions. As a condition of applying for or receiving any federal financial assistance, a recipient must sign an assurance that the program will be conducted or the facility will be operated in compliance with Title VI requirements. These assurances, just like the policy statement, must be signed by the head of your agency. The standard US DOT assurances are found in DOT Order 1050.2A. They can also be read in full in the NDOT Title VI implementation plan, a link to which will be included on a later slide. The standard DOT assurances state that, as a condition of receiving federal financial assistance, the local agency will abide by all Title VI directives, the ultimate purpose, of course, being to prevent discrimination on the basis of race, color, and/or national origin. The assurances also state that the local agency will insert certain required clauses into every contract subject to the Title VI program, that is, federally funded contracts. These clauses can be found in attachments A through E of the standard DOT assurances. If an applicant fails or refuses to furnish the required assurance, or otherwise fails or refuses to comply with a requirement imposed by or pursuant to that section, federal financial assistance may be refused. The contract provisions contained in the assurances are described on this slide. Non-discrimination in the selection and retention of subcontractors and in procurement of materials and leases of equipment. There's a contract provision on non-discrimination in the notification of Title VI obligations to each potential subcontractor or supplier. Non-discrimination in employment practices when employment is the primary objective of the federal assistance. And then finally, provisions to be included in deeds regarding Title VI and the use of property when the property has been given to a recipient by the federal government as assistance. These provisions must be included in all federally funded contracts, regardless of tier. The next element that should be included in your agency's Title VI plan is very simple. A section on organization and staffing of the person or people responsible for carrying out the Title VI responsibilities. And so a local agency or a recipient must designate a Title VI coordinator, manager, or specialist, and then briefly outline the roles and responsibilities of that position. The next element that your agency's Title VI implementation plan must contain is a complaint procedure, a procedure for informing all beneficiaries of their right to file complaints under the federal agency's regulations, for setting up channels for handling complaints, and then also for notifying the state and federal agencies involved. It's recommended that local agencies follow the 2019 Federal Highway Administration guidance when drafting their complaint procedures. This guidance can be found in the link on this slide. One of the most important things to remember is that all Title VI complaints against your local agency must first be passed up to the NDOT, who will then pass the complaint to the Federal Highway Administration Nebraska Division Office, who will then pass the complaint up to the FHWA Civil Rights Headquarters Office. Then the complaint may be delegated back down to one of those agencies for investigation. But every Title VI complaint must be passed up ultimately to the Federal Highway Administration HCR office. The next element that your agency's Title VI implementation plan should contain is a description of your training program for Title VI. This program should include instructions to staff regarding non-discrimination policies, requirements of the federal agencies in implementing Title VI, and techniques for communicating this to all employees, recipients, and vendors, if any. Nebraska DOT civil rights staff are available to provide Title VI training to local agency staff upon request. Next, your Title VI implementation plan should include a description of public outreach and notification, a system for notification of beneficiaries and potential beneficiaries of the program of non-discrimination under Title VI. Specific methods by which beneficiaries are to be informed of this policy should be set forth. It might include things like website publications or public statements, letters, brochures, meetings with community groups and organizations, or releases to the news media. Next, your Title VI implementation plan should discuss how the agency will collect data. In general, recipients should have available racial and ethnic data showing the extent to which members of minority groups are beneficiaries of programs receiving federal financial assistance. Local agencies or NDOT subrecipients must collect and maintain statistical data on their potential and actual subrecipients and subgrantees or beneficiaries or affected communities. When thinking about the topic of data collection, it's helpful to consider things like the race, color, and national origin of the population eligible to be served, the race, color, and national origin of a population likely to be adversely impacted by, for example, a transportation project, or the race, color, and national origin of the members of any planning or advisory board that is an integral part of the program or project. Finally, your Title VI implementation plan should include detailed plans for bringing discriminatory programs into compliance. As your agency creates its Title VI plan and begins to implement its parts, you may discover policies or programs that are discriminatory or non-compliant. The Title VI plan should describe how these items will be corrected. This might include detailed identification of the actions that are being taken or planned, such as assignment of staff responsibility, dates and agenda of meetings and workshops, copies of instructions, meeting with vendors, and so forth. The plan should also include a timetable showing how long it will take to bring the total program into compliance. For an example of a Title VI implementation plan, which includes each of the elements that we've discussed in these prior slides, I encourage you to go to the Nebraska DOT Title VI implementation plan and just peruse the document. Just read down through the document. You're going to find the policy statement, the assurances and contract provisions. You're going to find a complaint procedure. You're going to find staffing and organization information, and much more. I think this is a great document for local agencies to sort of draw a bead on and base their implementation plans off of. Although I'll say that, the size and thoroughness of the Title VI implementation plan will depend on the size and population, the number of employees of the local agency. So not every agency's implementation plan needs to look exactly like the state of Nebraska DOT's implementation plan. As I mentioned earlier, there are 3 typical Title VI situations that will require reporting or coordination between a local agency and the Nebraska DOT Civil Rights Office. The first is Title VI complaints against your agency, if any are received. I spoke about this just a few moments ago on the slide about complaint procedures, and so I won't go back into it now. Also, the annual Title VI update, which is submitted to NDOT by July 31st of each year, and then finally subrecipient reviews, which are initiated by the NDOT. The requirement to submit an annual Title VI update applies to each subrecipient with an active NDOT project. These annual Title VI reports are due to the NDOT Civil Rights Office by July 31st of each year. The purpose of these reports is to examine and ensure Title VI compliance, even on years that your local agency is not selected for a more detailed compliance review. A template for this annual report can be found in the document appendix of the NDOT Title VI implementation plan, and I've provided on this slide another link to that document. NDOT subrecipients with active transportation projects with the NDOT's Local Assistance Division may be selected for a more thorough compliance review. NDOT is required by federal regulation in 23 CFR 200, those are the FHWA implementing regulations, to conduct reviews of its subrecipients. Subrecipients will generally not be selected for compliance reviews more often than once about every 4 years, unless complaints or compliance issues or some other irregularity prompts the NDOT Civil Rights Office to take a more frequent look at some local agency. If your local agency is selected for a compliance review, you'll receive a compliance review questionnaire from the NDOT, and the agency will be required to submit the completed questionnaire along with the most recent copies of their Title VI implementation plans to the NDOT Civil Rights Office. The NDOT reviews the questionnaire responses and the subrecipient's program plans, and then assists the subrecipient in correcting any deficiencies. In the past, this has generally taken the form of training or technical assistance, assistance in drafting documents, and the provision of templates or example documents. It is the subrecipient's duty to cooperate with the NDOT throughout the compliance review process. But the compliance reviews are not a gotcha exercise. The NDOT's goal in these reviews is not punitive. It's to assist in bringing deficient programs into compliance. However, for non-responsive or non-cooperative subrecipients, federal funding or progress on any active NDOT project might be imperiled or delayed. If you have any questions on this module, feel free to contact me at the contact information provided on this slide. You can also contact the Nebraska Department of Transportation Civil Rights Office. Their contact information is located on the first slide of this module.